Making beer at home. The history of home brewing. The process of brewing beer has been around as an art for a millennium. It's only been recently, however, that practitioners have tried to turn it into an applied science. The oldest American brewery is D.G. Yaneling & Son in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, which has been brewing beer since 1829. Although we think of home brewing and brewing of beer in general as starting in the 1800s, beer has actually been around for much longer than that. Home brewing and beer have always played a large and important part in our lives. In fact, it is believed that Noah provided for beer to be part of the provisions on the ark. Ale. What we know today as beer was originally known as ale. Ale was made by fermenting the extract from grains and cereals. Certain herbs such as ground ivy and stinging nettle were used for flavoring and bittering. At the start of the 15th century, people began to notice a difference between beer and ale, as beer was the hop beverage that was made in Belgium. Beer and ale were the drink of the common people throughout the country before coffee, tea and cocoa were introduced. Monasteries were the location of some of the first commercial breweries in England. Many families, specifically farmers, brewed their own ale, or beer, although there were professional brewers in town that made it as well. In fact, home brewing was a household industry in those days. Most of these professional brewers consisted of widows, because this was one of the few career choices open to widows. Workers at estates often received ale as wages when taverns came into existence. They would each brew their own ale. They'd put a fresh bush outside of the place so those passing by would know there was fresh brew available. The 1600s. In 1683, William Penn started a business of brewing beer in Pennsburg, to earn money as well as encourage people to drink beer instead of hard liquor, which seemed to cause bad tempers for many. The early methods of brewing beer consisted of heating and soaking barley to encourage germination. The result of this mixture, called malt, was then mixed with water and brought to a boil until it formed the word one, which meant it was fermented. Hops too were then added to the boiling substance, to give it a distinctive aroma and pleasant yet bitter taste. Hops are used as a stability agent and for flavoring in beer. The liquid was then strained, at which time yeast was added. It was then allowed to ferment for a couple days. English versus other beer. One major difference between brewing methods then and today is the timing process. Prior to the 20th century, a rule of thumb or old-time recipe determined the timing, as opposed to the modern equipment and technology used today. There was a difference between English beer and the early American beer. When the English beer was made, they fermented it with yeast that floated on the top, whereas Germans used yeast that would stay on the bottom of the wort. When the Germans removed the yeast, they allowed the beer to one wort is the unfermented or fermented solution of malt used after the fermented mixture becomes beer. Two hops come from the humulus plant, which bears female flowers in the shape of cones, which is what are used in the brewing process. Age at low temperatures for weeks. This resulted in milder beer with a better aroma, making it a more popular style of beer. This beer took over the beer industry, so the floating yeast style of beer making was left for the making of ale. This was when the real distinction between beer and ale was made. The 1800s. The late 1800s brought about many changes in the home brewing of beer. It became more difficult for the small businessperson or individual to compete with the larger breweries using up-to-date equipment. The addition of the railroad helped breweries distribute their beer around the nation. However, this made it a requirement that beer be able to withstand sitting for days, changes in temperature and getting shook up a lot of the time in transit. Chemical additives had to be removed, and pasteurization was necessary to prevent bacterial growth. The 1900s and Prohibition laws came into effect to make sure these requirements were followed. The early 1900s brought about the Great Prohibition, a time when it was forbidden to sell any alcoholic beverages. This hurt the beer and liquor business drastically, but it did survive. After Prohibition was done, it took many years to get the people back in the habit of drinking beer rather than hard liquor. However, home brewing was made legal in 1976 and many small-town craft brewers began making and marketing their own brands of beer, for sale to other businesses and areas. The sales of craft beer grew so high that they became competitive to some of the large brewers, who then began developing and Marketing their own brands of beer. Homebrew is not near as popular as it once was, with the many different laws that have enacted through the years. Many have switched from the home brewing of beer to try their hands at wine and other liquors. The interesting thing about home brewing, however, is that with each beverage you make, you'll want to make more of some other variety just to experiment. 2. Reasons for home brewing. People choose to home brew for different reasons. Some enjoy the art of making their own beer for personal consumption, while others home brew for the competitive spirit in amateur brewing contests. Others home brew to distribute it at social gatherings in their home, and some just do it for the hobby. Regardless of the reason, home brewing is still very popular and a lot of fun once you learn the art. While the term home brewing may refer to the brewing of beer, alcoholic beverages and even some soft drinks, it's most often used when discussing the making of beer. Beer and money. In the time of the Babylonians, beer was valued so highly that it was used as wages to be given to workers in lieu of money. Beer also played an important role to the Egyptians, as it was brewed for royalty, medical purposes and to be used in burials as a provision for the trip to the hereafter. In the 1600s, when an Egyptian gentleman gave a lady a sip of his beer, it meant they were betrothed. Beer was also used for payment, trading, tithing and taxing in the medieval times. So, you can see whereas it's a form of refreshment today, beer was of much more importance in the past. As far back as the time 4000 BC, there were reasons for home brewing. The beer connoisseur. If you've ever gone into a bar and observed beer drinkers, you'll see that some will order the cheapest beer in the bar or drink whatever brand the bar happens to serve. These are not true connoisseurs of beer. A true and serious beer drinker has specific ideas of what they want in their beer. This is another reason why many choose home brewing. They like a specific style of beer and thrive to get just the right taste. Often there is a certain taste or style of beer that is not available commercially in their area, so they home brew to have access to it at any given moment. Home brewing is, for many, not only convenient but a way to get the live beer taste. Almost all beer that is made is pasteurized, so you're not getting the natural taste. When beer is pasteurized, it has to be cooked, which takes out the carbonation. Commercial brewers force carbonation by taking the boiled off alcohol and mixing it with the pasteurized beer, which kills the yeast. Without live yeast, the beer will not age properly, which affects the taste of the beer. Yeast not only improves the taste of beer, but the color and texture as well. The more beer ages, the better it tastes, which is a large reason why so many choose to homebrew their own beer. Beer as fuel. Another unique use for homebrew is as a type of fuel. Many farmers that have a surplus of biomaterials such as rice, grains, potatoes, beets, etc. will use these materials to make their own alcohol to power their farm equipment. This is not only creative, innovative and energy efficient but also very economical. Cars and trucks can also use this cost-saving fuel as an alternative to paying the high prices at the pump. Saving money. Home brewing beer can be much cheaper than purchasing equivalent type beers from commercial brewers, taverns or stores. Some home brewers choose to customize their recipes to their taste buds, which can cost more, but it's still usually more economical to home brew their own beer. Everyone enjoys a different taste to his or her beer. Not to mention, the great taste of freshly home brewed beer and the satisfaction of bragging to your friends that it's your beer. Hop is the substance that gives beer the majority of its flavor and home brewing allows the maker to adjust the amount of hop flavor they put in their home brew. Some devoted beer drinkers will adjust the amount of hop flavoring to be much higher than what they'd taste in a commercial beer. Home brewing also gives the person the opportunity to adjust the amount of alcohol that goes into the beer, since some like high alcohol content whereas others like a milder beer flavor. Home brewers often like to experiment with darker or lighter beers and create some specialty beers that are unavailable on the open market or very rare and difficult to find. Besides all the obvious reasons mentioned here for home brewing, it's just plain and simple a lot of fun. Once you get started, you won't want to quit. The anticipation of tasting your home brew is something that will keep you looking at the calendar. Your friends will probably all be on your doorstep on the sampling day when it's ready to drink. 3. Legality of home brewing. Many people that are considering home brewing are concerned about the legality of this process. When we think of home brewing, Prohibition 3 comes to mind. This was a dismal period in the hearts of the many beer drinkers. It lasted far too long for their liking and took many years to get beer back on the market as strong as it was prior to Prohibition. The laws have changed a lot throughout the years, differently in many states and countries. Although home brewing is legal in most areas, you should check the legality in your state or country before you begin this fun process. For many years after the Prohibition, home brewing was still illegal in certain areas of the United States in spite of the fact that Prohibition was repealed in 1933. In 1978, in the U.S., an act or bill was passed in Congress regarding home brewing during President Jimmy Carter's tenure in office. Many people mistakenly believe his bill allowed the home brewing of beer and wine, which was at that time still illegal. The bill that was actually passed made certain amounts of home-brewed beer for personal use exempt from taxation. To further understand this bill and other bills regarding home brewing, you can check your local statutes. State law. The U.S. constitutions have given each individual state the right to dictate the laws that will be in effect regarding the manufacture of home-brewed beer or other alcoholic substances. Do not assume what is legal in one state will be legal in the next state. You don't want to see a new hobby of yours turn into a nightmare of legal issues. Alabama, for one, clearly states that it is illegal in all counties to have any equipment or apparatus used to manufacture any kind of alcoholic beverages. It's also illegal there to have any illegally manufactured beverages brought into the state or transported inside the state. Most of the states in the United States, however, do permit home brewing. There are some restrictions to the amounts of beer and the age of the person brewing. Most of these laws allow no more than 100 gallons of home brew per person per household, and the person must be over the age of 21. The maximum they can brew per year is 200 gallons. People that brew their own beers are restricted from selling it because the federal government taxes alcohol through excise taxes. Most Western countries have the same home brewing laws. In Michigan, for instance, it's perfectly legal to brew your beer if you are over 21 years of age, but only up to 100 gallons you can give your home brew to other people, but you cannot sell it. The 100 gallons, incidentally, can be broken down into 25-gallon batches of brew. Many home brewers like making smaller amounts at one time so they can experiment with different flavors, colors and varieties. Kentucky, on the other hand, prohibits anyone from having in their possession any apparatus used in the manufacture of any alcoholic beverage, including home brew. While they are more concerned with illegal distilling, their laws can also be extended to the home brewing of beer. Brewing versus distilling. Make sure that you don't confuse home brewing with distilling, which is very illegal in most states without certain permits and requirements. Again, it's very important for your peace of mind to check the specific laws in your locality to ensure that you won't be in legal jeopardy when you begin this hobby. Laws usually vary from country to country or state to state. Sweden, for instance, allows you to home brew beer as long as you don't try to sell it and as long as you only use it for personal use. The United Kingdom does not allow individuals to distill or sell their home brew products. It's legal to home brew beer or other fermented beverages. Home brewers do not have a cap on how much they can make, either. Australia allows individuals to home brew their own beverages. The only restriction is that they cannot use a still. If any individual does own a still, its size cannot be larger than 5 liters and it cannot be used for the distilling of alcohol. The only use they may have for a still is to still certain substances like water or essential oils. New Zealand allows home brewing and distilling as of 1996, when the ban against this was lifted. Individuals cannot distill spirits for their own personal use here, but they cannot sell or supply any alcoholic beverages unless they have the appropriate and correct license to do so. South Africa allows individuals to manufacture fermented beverages in their home without any limits on the amount. Interesting, though, is that they cannot distill or sell their beverages or give them to any of their staff. The reasoning behind the law regarding their staff is unclear unless it's a legal issue involving intoxication. What you will find in most states or countries is that the art of home brewing beer, wine or any fermented beverage is not what is against the laws, rather it's the sale of these products that's restricted. In many states, home brewing is not considered in their laws because they are more concerned with the manufacture and sale of hard liquors. Because home brew is not commercially manufactured and sold, it's often not included in the statutes and regulations, leaving a lot of gray area in the law. Check the laws where you live before you begin, just to be on the safe side. 4. Advantages and disadvantages of home brewing. As with any hobby, there are advantages and disadvantages. The same is true with the home brewing of beer. However, most people that choose to home brew their own beer or other beverages will tell you that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. When thinking of the number one advantage to home brewing, what comes to mind is the thing that means the most to beer lovers: taste. Drinking commercially brewed beer as opposed to home brewed beer is like eating food when you have a cold. The food just doesn't taste like it should. You're not getting the full flavor. When you're drinking commercially brewed beer that has been canned, bottled, exposed to outside air and knocked around, it's not going to taste anywhere near as good as fresh beer. If you don't believe this, open up a bottle of beer from the store, sniff it, and then sniff your freshly brewed beer. You'll see there is no comparison. Suffice it to say, you may not want to ever go back to drinking store-bought beer. This is probably the main advantage to brewing your own beer at home. Health advantages. Brewing your own beer gives you the advantage of a healthy beverage. You may be surprised to see beer being described as a healthy beverage, but it's healthy in the aspect that you know what's going into the beer and what's not. If you've ever looked at the ingredients on a bottle of beer, or any beverage for that matter, you'll probably find that you don't recognize half the ingredients that are going into the product. Worse than that is the fact that you are consuming these unfamiliar ingredients. By brewing your own beer, you're getting all natural ingredients that are familiar to you. You're also not getting all the preservatives you get when you drink commercial beers, so you're getting a better quality, better tasting beer. You'll be familiar with the malt, barley, hops, or whatever other natural ingredients you put in your beer. In your quest for good home brewing recipes, you'll find there are many varieties you can try. Regardless of which recipe you finally decide to stick with, you'll still know what goes in the beer. What you'll like also with making your own beer is that you can control the alcohol content that goes in the beer. You may like higher alcohol content while your wife enjoys a milder beer. When you buy a 6-pack of beer, you're forced to drink a certain alcohol content unless you want to buy another 6-pack of lower or higher alcohol content. When you make your own brew, you can mix it up and make a variety to suit everyone. Bragging rights. Let's not forget about the bragging rights. When you're done making your beer, you'll probably want to have a party or social gathering to show off your home brewing skills. It will give you a lot of pride to be able to say that you made it yourself. Your friends will be impressed with your culinary skills and want to learn all they can about home brewing. Home brewed beer has a fresh, natural taste that you will never get with commercially brewed beer. Not only is it a natural and better tasting choice, but it's also very cheap compared to what you'd pay in a supermarket or liquor store. The ability to experiment with the recipe will continue to be a source of fun for you. You'll never get tired of trying different recipes and making different types of beer. Whether it's mild beer, high alcohol content, dark or light beer, you'll love experimenting until you find the perfect combination for your new favorite recipe and drink. Another advantage to home brewing is that in addition to having a premium tasting beer, you'll also get it at an affordable cost. Once you have all you need for your beer making venture, you'll be able to make beer for just a few pennies a beer. The cheapest type of commercial beer you buy is at least $1 a bottle. You'll be amazed at how much beer you can brew with that same dollar as cheaply as you can make this beer. It's a shame that you can't sell it. Disadvantages. Now we'll get into the disadvantages of home brewing your own beer or beverages. As discussed earlier, there are not near as many disadvantages as there are advantages. Besides the mess you'll have, one disadvantage to making your own beer is the initial startup costs. If money and budget is a major concern for you, you may find it difficult to comfortably buy everything you need to make your own beer. You can typically expect to spend a few $100s to get you started. The equipment you need will cost around $100 plus a large kettle, which may cost up to $50 or more. Keeping in mind your store's prices for liquid and dry yeast, the entire list of ingredients to make a 5-gallon match can cost from $25 to $50. You'll also want to buy some sanitizers and bottles, which will cost from $10 to $20 for 24 bottles of 12 Oz. Size. The bottles, however, can be reused repeatedly with sufficient cleaning. Although you may continue to use your kitchen equipment to save money, many people choose to purchase special equipment designed specifically for beer making. Although these costs may sound expensive for starting off, many of them are one-time costs. Not to mention, you'll get a lot of beer for the amount of money you've invested. Another disadvantage of home brewing your own beer is that you'll love the taste so much you may find yourself drinking more than you used to and more than you should. Your neighbors may be over more often than normal as well just to get some of your great tasting free at least to them beer. Home brewing can also be very messy and time consuming, especially until you fully get the hang of it. You may decide you want a special room for this process if you'll be doing it frequently. 5. Varieties of home brewing. While hearing the terms, home brew makes us most often think of beer, we are definitely not limited to beer. Beer is usually the beverage that most people interested in home brewing begin with, mostly because it's the most popular. Another reason is that it's the fermented beverage that's most often consumed. Home brewing of beer is a fun experience for everyone, but especially individuals that enjoy a good beer as well as variety of different flavors. You can easily switch from a mild light beer to a dark beer with high alcohol content. This is what most home brewers enjoy the most about making their own beer, the ability to experiment until they find just the perfect taste. Wine brewing. If you're an individual that likes a good glass of wine, you'll love the opportunity of home brewing your own wine as well. For special occasions, like social gatherings or formal affairs, many enjoy drinking hard liquor. Liquor is also a beverage you'll find fun and interested to make yourself. Many wine brewing starter kits are available if brewing wine is what you want to try next. You won't be limited in your selection, as you'll be able to make red wines, white wines, port ice wine, champagne, hard cider and more. Many of the companies that sell winemaking kit will help you with almost any kind of wine you choose to make. You tell them the flavor or type you want to make and they'll help you get the right winemaking ingredient kit. If you are planning to make wine in the future, you may want to start saving your old wine bottles so you won't have to invest the money in new bottles. Sometimes the price of the new empty bottles can cost almost as much as the brew itself. Your initial investment will include the ingredients and equipment, which will run around $150. Much of the equipment that you have used for home brewing beer can be used for wine and other spirits. This is especially true if you've invested in higher quality equipment. One thing that many home brewers enjoy about making their own wine is the flavor of the beverage while they're actually making it. The taste is usually so good that they find themselves drinking it while they're making it. Another positive about winemaking is that as easy as beer making is, most state making wine is even easier. The average batch size you'll get with the starter winemaking kits is 6 gallons. While that may not sound like a lot, it can go a long ways. It takes most people quite a while to go through even 1 gallon of wine, much less 6 unless they drink a lot. Most wine is not consumed as often or in such large quantities as beer. A good rule of thumb with making wine is that the longer it sits, the better it's going to taste. If you find that it doesn't taste all that great, it's probably not ready. When it is ready to drink, you'll find that it's probably the best tasting wine you've ever had. The mixing and sanitation process for wine only takes about a half an hour, with the bottling taking 1 to 2 hours. Then you wait 6 or more weeks to get great tasting wine. If the wine was made right with proper sanitation techniques, it will stay fresh for over a year. The use of premium corks and higher alcohol content will keep it fresh even longer. Liqueurs and cordials. In years past, the younger generation of drinkers was mostly beer drinkers. While they still enjoy a good beer today, they also love the taste of liqueurs and cordials. If you think it's mostly the older generation that enjoys these fancy drinks, you couldn't be more wrong. Everyone enjoys a good drink. Occasionally, this is the perfect way to increase the inventory in your home bar without spending an arm and a leg. The varieties of liquor that you can make are unbelievable. Imagine the fun you'll have making creme de menthe, creme de coco, Irish creme, hazelnut, cherry brandy, amaretto, blackberry schnapps, peach schnapps or Kahlua. Most home brew kits for liqueurs and spirits will offer you a base recipe to start with and directions on the different flavorings you want to use. The one thing home-brewed liquor has in common is the taste. You'll find no comparison between the flavors of home-brewed liqueur compared to commercially brewed liqueur. Homebrew soda pop. While you're so busy making your beer or liquor, your kids won't mind all the time it takes when they learn how to make their own soda. This relatively simple process only takes about an hour or so. You and they will love the flavor of the homemade ginger ale, sarsaparilla, cream soda, cherry soda, root beer, cola and more. This tradition of making soda goes way back and is as educational as it is fun. Making homemade soda doesn't require a lot of equipment. You'll need a siphon hose, a stirring spoon, bucket, a kettle for boiling and some soda bottles. You'll also need to get some caps and a bottle capper. By the way, your kids will love using the bottle capper and capping their own bottles. These are available in any store that sells homebrew supplies. The only real ingredients you'll need are flavoring packs, yeast packs, sugar and water. Yeast packs made for beverages works better than bread yeast and will give your soda a better taste. You'll find that making soda is fun, quick and gives you and your family a great tasting beverage. Making your own soda consists of nothing more than mixing the sugar and water, adding the flavoring, mixing in the yeast, and then siphoning it into the bottles. Once the bottles are full, you put the caps on them and let them sit for 2 weeks. 6. Glossary of home brewing terms. If you're new to the process of home brew, you're going to be reading many words and terms that will be unfamiliar to you. While you don't need to know what they all mean, it will be helpful to have a general idea of what most of them mean. Keep in mind that some of these terms may be used in larger breweries rather than in your home brewing process. While there are many other brewing terms, these are the most common ones you will hear in your home brewing. Additives. These substances such as preservatives, enzymes or antioxidants may be added to your home brew to add to the shelf life or simplify the brewing process. Adjunct. This is a fermentable material used to make it cheaper or lighter bodied beer and is a substitute for the traditional grains. Alcohol. This may refer to either ethyl alcohol or ethanol. When the yeast works with the sugar in the malt, you get a certain alcohol content, which makes it intoxicating. Others describe it as the result of fermentation. Alcohol by weight. This means the amount of alcohol that's in your beer as a percentage of the volume of beer. If a bottle states it's 2.5% alcohol by weight, it means it has 2.5 grams of alcohol for every 100 centiliters of beer. Ale. This is a type of beer resulting from the use of malted barley and the top fermenting types of brewer's yeast. Most ale you'll find will have hops in them, which balances out the flavor. All malt. This is a beer that is made from all barley malt and no adjuncts. Alpha acids. These are the bittering compounds in hops, which are extracted when the hops is boiled with the wort. The higher the alpha acid content, the more bitter the taste will be. Barley. This is a cereal grain, which once malted, is used as mash when brewing beer. Barrel. This is both size tubing are made of heavy-duty plastic. Vessel. This is the container where the beer will be kept during the fermentation period. Wort. This term is used to describe the mixture of the boiled water and malt after the hops has been added and before it's fermented. Wort chiller. This is used to quickly chill the boiling wort to help the yeast pitch much quicker, which helps prevent the risk of infection. It's not a necessity, but makes things go much quicker and smoother. Some choose to make their own with a tubing bender and copper tubing. Yeast. This ingredient helps with the fermentation in your home brew. While some people may try to use baker's yeast, brewer's yeast will work much better. 7. Accessories needed for home brewing from scratch. Now that you've read so much about home brewing, you're probably all excited and ready to get going. Although your beer will need a couple weeks from the first day until it's ready to drink, the actual home brewing process only takes a couple hours. Your main concern is probably what equipment you'll need to start home brewing. A lot of this will depend on how serious you're about home brewing. There are a few different factors you may want to take into consideration. The two main factors are your seriousness about home brewing and your budget. If you're very serious about getting into home brewing and think you'll be doing it a lot, then you'll probably want to purchase some good home brewing equipment. On the other hand, if you are trying this for the first time and aren't sure if you'll do it again, you're not going to want to spend a lot of money on new home brewing equipment. Some of the household equipment you already have in your kitchen may suffice. You also need to keep your budget in mind. If finances are a concern, you'll want to use what you already have in your kitchen or get your equipment as cheaply as possible. Many of the equipment pieces listed will make your home brewing easier, but aren't a necessity. One last thing you should consider when deciding what to buy and what not to buy is the amount of room in your home. Do you have extra space for additional equipment such as what you'll need for home brewing? Although many of the pieces are small, some of them are larger and will take up some space. Equipment list. Here is a list of what you will need for beer making in your home. A large pot. You'll need it to be at least 5 gallons, some use up to a 16-gallon size. The larger the better because there will be less chance for spills. This is usually a large stainless steel pot, sometimes called your brew kettle. Tubing and clamps. Clamps you can get at a store that sells home brewing equipment. Tubing is for the siphoning of the beer. You'll want food-grade plastic. Tubing in both 3/8 inside diameter and 1 inside diameter. leave before you press like button below and subscribe to this channel. As a subscriber you will receive a new notifications every time a new video is uploaded. Good luck.